Hello everyone. My name is Aruna Raman. I am a person with lived experience of mental illness, but I also have several other identities. But today I'm here in a capacity that I explained earlier on. So I've been thinking about why people with a lived experience of mental illness and mental distress can do so much more in terms of being partners for content, for running workshops on mental health, mental illness, and mental wellness. And what we as people of lived experience can do to sort of create more space for ourselves, especially people who are old school like me and who are not savvy on social media as much as others are. So let me first start with what a person with lived experience can do in an engagement, like perhaps, media talk or a panel, or even being interviewed in the news, or workshops, teaching, facilitation. The opportunities are really endless. And I'm just discovering that myself because I'm trying to carve out a place as an educator and advocate, but in my own way, in mental wellness and illness. So, firstly, the name is self explanatory, right? People with lived experience have lived the experience. So, they know exactly what goes on from a very generic perspective that, mental illness has certain indicators, it has a certain vocabulary, it impacts your life in a certain way, and then it intersects with other parameters like society, culture, economics, caste, class, gender, depending upon what your place is in the world. Uh, on the other hand, they are also aware of the viscera of living with a mental illness, what it means on a day to day basis. And even if they're not able to advocate it, they know what it means. So that's even if you're a trained mental health professional, you understand it in theory, you understand it by virtue of your interactions with your clients. But I would argue that as a person with lived experience, especially if you become sensitive to your own internal monologues, if you become sensitive to your conversations with others, if you are mindful of how you connect with the world and what sort of support mechanisms you are finding. I think you can craft that into a very effective, empathetic, compassionate narrative for others to benefit from. And just a satellite point, a lot of us with lived experience of mental illness, especially in countries where stigma is very prevalent, we do advocate for ourselves, right from explaining why we feel and navigate the world in a certain way to others, legitimizing our conditions, even because they may seem fictitious to people who are not in that landscape, mental, emotional landscape. And also finding resources, finding help, trying to see if that help is suitable to us economically in terms of access and many other things. And that advocacy really carries us through into also empathetic advocacy for others, sometimes even in ways that we would fiercely protect people who are like us. And I'm referring to a broad spectrum of mental illness. I'm not a trained mental health professional, so I can't speak to types of mental illnesses, although I have working knowledge of these through my own reading and research. So that's the first reason, which is as a person with a lived experience yourself, you know the landscape, you advocate for yourself, you know what your daily life is as a person with mental illness. You know the vocabulary, you know the world that you've created, and therefore you would strive to create that kind of world for others. Secondly, for better or for worse, depending upon if our experiences are similar or different to others, we do have a handle on what resources are available, especially the ones that have had to become intrepid in scoping out these resources because they're not clearly amplified or available, or due to the sheer shortage of mental health professionals in this country. So, if you employ a person with a lived experience in your conversation, or in a teaching engagement, or in a one-on-one situation with someone who's going through a mental health situation, they already have some knowledge of what resources are available. And some among us who are trying to bridge this gap between just being a person with a lived experience to someone who would like to do more with it, is going beyond what ecosystem they have for themselves. So, for example, I have a therapist and a psychiatrist, but I'm constantly looking for such professionals that are also relevant in other situations. So, someone, let's say, who speaks a different language, someone who doesn't live in a city, someone perhaps who's available in an online format, as most mental health professionals are, someone who might offer low cost therapy but is also reliable. And this is not just picking someone off the internet, right? I actually know these people. And if people with lived experience are fashioning themselves to be something more, they're also very conscious about equipping themselves with the right kind of training and knowledge, because they would never hazard suggesting anything that would not be verified. So let me explain that. The first video I made, it's about a corporate workshop on mental wellness. And the person made some irresponsible suggestions, right? Like how to they said you can combat health anxiety by meditating. Now, as someone who has lived with health anxiety, I would never say that. I would say, I'm not quite sure how to do that, but let me research this and get back to you. Because I know what it means to live with it myself. So if I'm not recommending that to myself and I know it didn't work for me, why would I recommend that to somebody else? So that's the advantage you have with a lived experience person. Thirdly, apart from the immediate resources, there is also access to networks that we very eagerly and conscientiously build. So for me, when I started on my journey of recovery, like conscious recovery, I reached out to a lot of other people that were going through similar situations. So other sufferers of anxiety, depression, and this happened both consciously and accidentally. Accidentally, I mean, people revealed their stories to me when they heard my story. Even my friends, even people in my family circle, right? And consciously, I actually did a lot of looking online. I kept my ears open. I heard a lot of stories that I otherwise wouldn't have heard. And I made as much as, at that time, my mental health condition would allow me to reach out to these people, mainly to find kindred spirits, I agree, mainly to find succor. But a lot of these people are still in my network, because then I became curious about, at a personal level, how do they manage their anxiety and still continue to do what they do as work or as a passion, or, in their different societal roles that they play. Secondly, what social, cultural, economic constructs intersect with their lives, and how do they navigate that. So for someone like me, and I'm sure with many others in this space who have a lived experience, they have this kind of dichotomous network of people like them, and also people who are in the other network that I talked to you about earlier, which is therapists, counselors, support people. So you're already getting a very verified network, because I trust myself with this network and this ecosystem. So I might not say that this is a perfect fit for someone else, but I might dig and find out if there are others that would be more suited to somebody who's in a different milieu, right? So you're getting that benefit. And the fourth benefit, especially in the times of the pandemic, and I don't have specific studies verifying the statistic, but it's something that I've heard thrown about quite a lot, which is there are only 4,500 mental health professionals in India for a population of 1.3 billion people. And those who are hearing this, if you have better research or studies or sources, please write in the comments. I would love to share verified information. So do the math, and I've heard from my own therapist and my psychiatrist that their caseload has increased twofold, threefold, fourfold because of the pandemic. And people who have never come to therapy, my psychiatrist was saying he had not heard from someone for 2 years. They were doing really well. And during the pandemic, they had a relapse. So how can this number cater to newly appearing cases, right? And that's the problem. And the solution here is you have this ready roster of people with lived experience. Not all of them can jump into playing a supporting role, but some definitely can. I know others like me who would love to do something, and I'm scoping several opportunities. And these are people who, with some training, with some hand holding, not necessarily formal training in counseling or clinical psychology, can at least provide that first level of listening, which is if it's not a chronic mental health condition and a lot of people are situationally mentally distressed, person with lived experience can listen, they can make a lot of observations, and to some extent even determine if someone needs additional help or not. And you can take training to do that. There are courses available to do that. So you are on the one hand lamenting about lack of trained professionals, and on the other hand you're wasting the talent that lies within the folds of lived experience. So doesn't make sense to me. So I've talked about the benefits. Now what are the barriers? And this is my personal experience, so feel free to share your own as someone who's trying to navigate the space, or disagree with me, because on a side note, I find that there's not enough debate and dissent in mental health conversations and discourse, and I want these videos and other initiatives that I'm planning to be spaces for constructive criticism and dissent and debate, because I'm telling you that as a person of lived experience, you don't have to wrap me up in tissue paper and mollycoddle me and say the things you think I want to hear. I can take debate, dissent, critique. I enjoy it. I can give it back. So anyway, coming back, the reason, firstly, the stigma, right? So how many people would feel comfortable revealing that they live with a mental health condition? That in itself is a big barrier. Revealing even to their loved one, their family, their friends, let alone, being in a space of recovery and then playing a role where they can communicate the recovery, right? And playing a role where they've created a space and they're comfortable that the space will remain and the space will be cherished, so that they can help others. So if their cup is not filled, to quote a very popular analogy, how can they fill others' cups, right? So the stigma is a big barrier, in my opinion, that a lot of other people don't speak out for themselves, let alone for others. Secondly, and I have faced this barrier several times, one of the reasons I started making these videos is even if you're a person with a lived experience, that's not a qualification, right? So I don't have a piece of paper or a LinkedIn profile saying that I'm a person with, I have a degree in lived experience from an Ivy League institute in the US or a premier mental health training institution in India or any part of the world. I don't have a piece of paper that guarantees it. All I have are my stories and my experiences and my brain and my thoughts and my feelings. And thoughts and feelings cannot fill a resume. Although there are people who've placed, I'm eternally grateful to people who have placed their faith in me and given me opportunities, but it's still hard navigating the space. And qualifications really bedazzle people. LinkedIn profiles bedazzle people more than heartfelt stories. So and that is also linked to the premise that there are significant barriers to entry in order to secure a qualification in the space. So I'm 43, well, I'm 42, I'll be 43, and I cannot gain entry into premier institutions in this country because of my age. Believe it or not, there are age limits. Secondly, institutions that in which that is not the case, I find to be old-fashioned, patriarchal. The learning has no practical value whatsoever, and these are things I've heard anecdotally from people who've been in this system, right? So, people who have trained to be counselors, who are training to be counselors, and there is a lot of programming overseas, but one can't go anywhere at this point, and overseas programs are expensive. So one, there's stigma, so people don't announce themselves. Two, you don't come in with qualifications, it's difficult to acquire those qualifications. So those are some of the barriers. So one, two, three, four. So people like me are old school, right? So we don't have pithy, smart, cute, quirky presences on social media. I like long form dialogue, which is very evident. I cannot make a 1 minute Instagram video every day of the week saying cute things about mental health. For people who do it, great. That's very, very helpful. That's shedding light on the space, which is helpful. But those are the people that are tapped again and again for more high profile mainstream discussions and conversations and other types of engagements, right? Now, if you're not that person, and believe it or not, I've even written to some of these influencers to sit down and have a conversation with me, because that's one of the forums that I'm planning, like one-on-one conversations with people in this space to lend some diversity and versatility to the dialogue, in addition to listening circles. So if anyone's interested and you've come like 16 minutes, 43 seconds into this video and you're still here, please DM me. So anyway, I'm not that person. I know a lot of very, very discerning, valuable people who are not those people, but they have a lot to offer. So, it's a very, how do I call it? Ludditist, anti-Ludditist space that we function in, that I'm a Luddite in this regard. I am on social media and I do post things once in a while, but this daily frenzy is not for me. I don't enjoy it, and it's not good for my mental health to keep up, right? So but whenever I switch on the television or I sign up for a talk and I see the same 4 or 5 people, and now I don't even have to look at the list of speakers. I know who's speaking, right? And I'm going to do another video on that, so stay tuned. So then what do we do, right? First is, if you can, take the agency into your own hands. I kept writing to people for collaborations and got the cold shoulder, and my anxiety led me to believe that I was not good enough. But then I just picked up my phone and said, if nothing, let these videos be ways of like just talking to myself, making notes to myself. And I started doing that. And the first one I made, I posted it on LinkedIn and Facebook and sent it to some people. Got tremendous responses, few, but tremendous. So not 50,000 likes or the blue tick or anything like that, but the 5 people I really cared about said very insightful things. And their responses run into maybe 2 pages. So you see why I don't fit into the Instagram world. So create your space and agency if you're not getting it. But also be prepared that your space might be small, right? But you will get noticed by people who think like you. So I'm working with phenomenal people who really share my ethics and integrity in terms of what we would like to do in this space, which is really create room for insightful discussions, cover topics that are not spoken about, really don't speak to the agency of people with lived experience, are not lively spaces for dissent and debate. So, when you create the space, you discover what the cadence is, what your cadence is, and what the cadence is of people that then start becoming your tribe. And that's a reassuring space to be in. Secondly, I feel like people in India with lived experience need to organize themselves better. It's very fragmented as of now. If you know of lived experience groups or forums, entities, please let me know. One example globally is the Global Mental Health Peer Network. It's a great organization. Friend of mine in Ethiopia is running a Service Users Association, which is a non-profit that engages service users to, feed into better policy and better outcomes. I am not aware of any of that in India. Again, I'm not talking about a satellite country chapter of a global organization. I'm talking about an indigenous organization. What else can we do? Yeah, and that's all I have to add, really. If you have other suggestions on how you can make your mark in this space as a person with lived experience, please write to me. If you see this on LinkedIn, like DM me, Facebook DM me. If someone forwarded this to you, please ask them, the person who forwarded this, for my contact details, and write to me with your ideas, with suggestions. Meanwhile, I'm on my journey, so there are more videos coming up. There's several topics I have at hand and different formats in which to make this work. So please remember, as a summary, people with lived experience can bring such variety, color, diversity, viscerality, and realness to these spaces, because we come in so many stripes. I am more of an evidence-based, research to lay science, demystifying research person. I'm also a communicator, but not a flamboyant communicator. You have the influencers, right? You have the flamboyant communicators who really know the lay of the land in terms of social media. You have advocates, lived experience advocates, who raise their voices in a different manner to how I do. You have people in literature, you have people who amplify voices in different ways. So there's not really one typology of a person with lived experience. So if people who are committed to doing well by their employees, doing well by the population that lives with mental illness, that's committed to caregivers, that's committed to the mental health landscape in this country, if they start involving people with lived experience more, I think it will be a whole new world. It will be a whole new world of engagement, and an inclusive one at that. So thank you for listening to me. Take care. Bye-bye.